With its fluid movement, varied scenarios, and endless customization, MechWarrior 3 speedrunning presents a rewarding experience for players looking for a new challenge. In this series of videos, I'll be taking you through all the details of MechWarrior 3 speedrunning, covering things like run planning, gameplay mechanics, strategies, and of course, glitches and exploits. By the time we reach the end of this series, you'll have everything that you need to take up MechWarrior 3 speedrunning and get some runs on the leaderboard of your own. But to start things off, we have to look at one of the most important elements of any speedrun: controls and movement. On screen now is the default controls for MechWarrior 3 as shown in the manual. These controls are far from intuitive, and even back in 1999 I found them clunky and awkward. Mech movement in MechWarrior 3 is actually quite smooth and responsive, but to get the most out of it we need an appropriate control scheme. This is the control scheme that I use for speedrunning. My changes from the default scheme are noted in the red text. As you can see, the main focus is keeping everything related to movement close enough for the left hand to easily use as needed. The now traditional WASD layout is used for basic movement, along with 100% and 0% throttle for quick starts and stops, and center torso to legs for getting us pointing in the right direction. The Q and E targeting keys are fine where they are, along with zoom and mask toggles. The Alpha Strike key is rarely used, but still good to have, along with next weapon group. My mechs are usually built around using a single weapon group only, so this isn't a super important key for me, but if you were using multiple weapon groups, you might consider putting that one on the mouse. Speaking of the mouse, this is in my opinion the single most important part of the control scheme. Mouse 1 retains its default as our fire weapon button, while Mouse 2 takes on the important role of switching fire modes. This is significant for the builds used, as we need to be able to freely switch from group firing to chain firing so that we can stay cool. But the real superstar here is Mouse button 3, which allows us to make full use of both the mouse aiming and mech torso twist. This is hugely important for efficient combat and opens up many possibilities. Allow me to demonstrate. Our battle mech functions very much like a walking tank. We can't strafe, A and D control turning instead, but we can torso twist, with torso movement being controlled by the mouse. If you think of the torso of the mech as being similar to the turret in a tank, you're on the right track. As we can't strafe, torso twisting is critical for allowing us to attack targets in one place whilst we move in a different direction. Where things get really interesting though is when we open up our aiming. Pressing the third mouse button unlocks the targeting reticule, giving us the ability to quickly attack targets without having to wait for our torso to line up. However, we need to be mindful that using the aiming mechanic in this way means that we are choosing between aiming and torso twisting. The most effective approach that I have found is to torso twist towards the target before quickly switching to free aiming before firing, then switching back as needed. With practice, quickly switching between the two becomes second nature and allows for combat that just wouldn't be possible otherwise. Jump jets are another mechanic critical to speedrunning. Jump jets are pretty well self-explanatory, though it is important to touch on MechWarrior 3's optional relaxed jump jets. When this option is enabled in the menu, the home key and others around it allow for the use of directional jump jets. This may not seem like a big deal, but it can be quite helpful in certain scenarios. Heat is the enemy of speed. If you're familiar with the MechWarrior franchise, you'd know about the heat mechanic. If you aren't, the short version is that firing weapons generates heat, which needs to be managed by the player so that we can attack effectively. If you keep firing your weapons without cooling down, you could find yourself with your mech shutting off and becoming non-functional. What you may not know is that in MechWarrior 3, heat also has a direct impact on speed. When your mech is running hot, it can't maintain its maximum speed. When overheating badly, this gets even worse. Take a look at this clip for example, paying close attention to the speed shown on the right and the heat shown on the left. Fortunately, we are given a few helpful ways to manage this. First is the coolant flush, which MechWarrior Online players will recognise as the cool shot from that game. A coolant flush drastically reduces heat in a very short space of time, however has a limited availability. The second way is water itself. When our mech is positioned in water, it cools at a significantly higher rate. But be aware that water can also slow down our mech, so don't go too deep. And finally, we need to talk about mask. You can think of mask as being similar to a sprint mechanic, but with some important differences. Mask is switched on and off like a toggle, and can be used indefinitely without any limits. However, when mask is engaged, the mech does not cool down as fast, which can cause major problems in high temperature environments or when firing weapons. To use mask effectively, you'll need to master toggling it on and off to suit the conditions. But as speed is life to a speedrunner, you're going to be using mask in just about every single scenario that you can manage. And that concludes our look at MechWarrior 3 controls and movement. The info I've covered is based on my own experiences, and I'd encourage everyone to try different things to see if there is another way that works better for you. We all approach things in different ways, so there is no real right or wrong way here. I hope that you found this guide helpful. Give speedrunning a try if you haven't already, it is an absolute blast. Keep an eye out for the next video in this series, but until then, bye for now.